consider this a professional courtesy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Some of you might have been able to detect a slight irregularity in my voice today. For that, I apologize. But for those of you who have been listening for a long time, you know every disease seeks me out, no matter how big or how small. I had hoped once my children got to be teenagers, perhaps the phenomenon of them being horrible petri dishes of illness would stop. Or at least they're who I choose to blame. Whatever the flu that's going around is, I seem to have caught it. Lots and lots of drugs to take to mitigate the symptoms. But here I am on a fabulous Friday, delivering the real estate goodness. You're welcome. We've got a few interesting tidbits today. We will see how long I can last. I also have a nice large cup of mocha here to caffeinate everything up. And we all know how things can go off the rails when the Rebel Broker has a full cup of coffee in him. There we go. Let's start the show off right. All right. A few interesting tidbits, right? It's nice to notice things, as you're strolling through life and you see different things happening. It's always nice to tie them in, right? Make those connections with other things that are going on. Now, for me, I have a lot of things going on in my life, but I like to find things that dovetail into real estate. And again, for the longtime listener, you know that to be true. Sometimes I reach pretty far out there to find some of these things. But one thing that I have talked about pretty consistently is everybody coming to grips with the changing nature of employment as we move forward. And that dovetails into a whole bunch of things, whether we're talking about automated cars, kiosks replacing employees in fast food restaurants, things that we're seeing right now that if you take them down their logical progression, really does paint a completely different picture than what we're used to of what the landscape of employment will look like. Now, one thing we talked about a year ago, this time a year ago, was Amazon's magical new store where you never need to actually interact with another human being. You just walk in, you grab what you want, you walk out, and you're done. It's called Amazon Go, and it opened up to the public on Monday. So now it's not just for Amazon employees. They've been testing it for a year. And if anybody thinks that Amazon is not going to license this technology to other retailers, they are crazy. This could be a huge moneymaker for Amazon. This is the kind of thing, I don't know if you saw the video, but there's a video of them testing it with everyone dressed up like Pikachu. Now, for those of you who don't know, who haven't been blessed with children of an age to allow you to be exposed to Pikachu and Pokemon and all that stuff, the big yellow, weird cat-looking thing with a black lightning bolt tail, well, that's the thing. And they sent in people wearing these costumes covered from head to toe in the Pikachu costume. And even that was not enough to fool the system on who took what and where they went. So this is a system that could work in any environment. All it would take is getting the right infrastructure installed, I'm sure, into the business. And the applications are pretty amazing. So this is absolutely going to be changing the landscape of employment. And again, I think it's something that we all should be aware of as we move forward. It's really going to change how people start off in jobs. A lot of these jobs that are entry-level positions where you learn how to be a good employee and simply get along with folks on a shift and keep track of your hours and all these kinds of things that are really fundamental to education that all of us have learned decades ago. Well, some of us learned decades ago with our very first part-time jobs, just aren't going to be a thing anymore, or there's going to be so few of them, they're going to be especially rare. It's going to be interesting to see what steps in and fills the gap of how do we get entry-level jobs for folks who need to learn how to hold a job. So that was number one. I thought that was an interesting thing to note this week. The second piece of interesting data for this week is architectural billings end the year on a positive note. Now, One reason why I like to keep track of what's going on with architectural billings is because it tells you what's coming. It not only tells you that building is coming, it tells you what kind of building is coming. Because if you see they're designing lots of apartment buildings, well, then that's what's going to get built. If they're building a lot of single-family residential homes, that's what's going to get built. The numbers are very interesting. The overall 2017 quoting the article now. 2017 turned out to be a strong year for architecture firms. All but 2 months saw the scores in positive territory. Additionally, the overall strength of the fourth quarter lays a good foundation for healthy growth in construction and activity in 2018. If we take a look at the chart, we can see that year-to-year comparisons actually look pretty optimistic. We're on sort of a upward trend. We saw a really good upward trend after a bottoming in 2009, where we saw a lot of growth up till 2011, and things have been kind of flat really since 2013, 2014. We actually saw a little bit of a decline in late 2017 compared to the previous year of November, December. But it actually still looks pretty good. The trend is generally up. Is it up where I would like to see it? No, it is definitely not up where we would like to see it. It is in positive territory, but it's far less than half of where it would be given a more robust market. So I think we still need to see growth there. But then again, we've been sort of coming at this particular reality from a lot of different angles, and it all just points to the same thing, that really this is all just a supply side problem. In terms of what the regional averages were, the South were the highest at 56.3. The West came in at 53, which was second. The Midwest came in at 52.9, and the Northeast came in at 49.4. Sector index breakdown, the multifamily residential was at 55.4, commercial industrial 54.8, institutional 51.2, and mixed practice 50.4. So we're still seeing lots of this being made up in multi-unit homes. What I would really like to see is a breakdown between multis versus single families. They don't tend to do that in this particular report. But of course, we'll keep a track on that here to see what we can expect in the coming year. Now, word from builders is we're going to see more single-family residentials, but from some of the numbers I'm seeing, it sounds like we may see a continuing trend towards multifamily. All right, next on our list, we've got some of the latest numbers for December for one of our bellwether markets, one of the markets we like to look at. Why? Because it's a key market. We saw that it had pretty much the largest bubble bust, followed by strong investor buying. That's why it is such a crucial one. And this is Phoenix. And it's one of those markets where I think it's good to understand what's happening there. Because if we're going to start to see things happening again, I think this is one of those markets that can give us a heads up, right? When you start to see things softening. But also when you start to see it softening in multiple markets, in multiple metros, the ones we cover, the ones we talk about, when you start to see sort of a synchronicity, I think that's a good warning sign. And remember, we're trying to plot the course here to make the best possible decision. So these are good markets to pay attention to. Now, number one, and this is from the folks at Calculated Risk. Of course, as usual, all of the articles that I use for this data will be available in the show notes for today's show. So please do take a minute to head on over to therebelbroker.com if you would like to get more detail on these numbers. They'll be available there at the website. Overall sales in December were up 0.7%, so less than 1% year over year. Now remember, that's always what you want to hear when you're looking at data. You don't want to hear the change from, say, a November to December or a July to August. You want to hear what it was the year before that, because you want to eliminate seasonal changes, seasonal influences. And by comparing December to December, you're just far more likely to get numbers that are more relevant to you in terms of being able to anticipate what may happen next. Now, what's interesting about this is at the same time that we were seeing year over year sales up 0.7%, the actual inventory was down 12.6% year over year. That shows that we're selling off existing inventory faster, right? The only way you can make that happen is if you're tending to sell off properties that have been around a little bit longer. So the final piece in that puzzle is, what was the price effect? We saw a increase in sales, a decrease in inventory. What did we see for prices? This is the 14th consecutive month with a year-over-year decrease in inventory, and prices are rising a little faster in 2017, 4.9% through October, or 5.9% if you're looking at it as an annual rate. So things continue to go up in Phoenix. Now, remember, Phoenix is a huge area. The greater Phoenix area is a lot of cities that come up on our suggested investment areas. Whenever you find something in Arizona, a city you've never heard of, it's probably something that borders Phoenix or is very close to Phoenix, particularly in the context of being a suggested market. One thing I like about Phoenix, I think Phoenix is a great starter market for people who are looking into getting into investing. And I think it's also very I don't live in Arizona friendly. It has a major airport there, so if it becomes a thing where you need to go there to check in on your investment regularly, it's easy to do. It's also a situation where you have a whole lot of submarkets in Phoenix that I think lend themselves to entry-level investors. But even more important, it's one of those marketplaces that has a wide variety of entry points in terms of cost. Now, the median sales price in Phoenix proper is $221,000. That's great. You can go in there, and if you shop around and you apply the things you've learned in terms of paying attention to the marketplace, understanding desirability, and looking into what the rents are in these various areas, you're going to be able to find an opportunity either in Phoenix or in one of the surrounding areas, whether it's Peoria, Glendale, Mesa, Gilbert, Chandler, any of these various areas that are around Phoenix. Odds are you're going to be able to find a place that works well for you. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about an interesting article from Homeunion. Those are the folks that give us some great stats. And one of their most recent articles, titled Where a Landlord Can Find the Highest Annual Rents, I think is a great place to start if you're someone who's looking for a location where you can really get going with top rents. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right. Aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. So glad you've decided to spend your valuable time with me. Right now, we're getting into discussing a recommendation from the good folks at Homeunion, talking about the three markets with the highest annual rents. Now, let's have a chat about this first. There's absolutely no arguing, I think, that when Homeunion comes out with a very specific task, they're very good at it. According to them, they analyze, quote, real estate markets based on a variety of indicators, annual rents, occupancy rates, job growth, and more. Collectively, these metrics empower your investment decisions. So they're trying to give you the best bang for the buck in terms of places to go to invest. But there's something you always need to be aware of in your own mind, and that is the relationship between the rent you can expect to charge and the price you can expect to pay. We've covered these numbers before on other communities where when we run down the list, for instance, we had a list we did, I think, last week where we were comparing what you'd pay for a home versus the rent. And we were finding there were some areas where you'd pay a lot less for a home, but the rent is higher, right? Well, that's the kind of dynamic you want. So it's always important to get the ground truth, figure these things out. The best news is this isn't a hard thing to do, really, remotely. You don't have to actually go to these cities at the outset to figure these things out. Now, you're going to want to go and get a feeling for the area. You're going to want to know the ground truth of where you're investing. But in terms, it's really about numbers. So if the numbers work, that just tells you can take that next step and go out and physically visit these locations and see where you want to invest. Now, in the case of this, you're going to want to know what's the typical barrier to entry, because you're going to want to establish a budget for yourself. If you're a brand spanking new investor and you're looking to put down X amount of dollars on an investment property, well, you need to know what the typical price is, right? If you're going into a marketplace where the average home that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath is $600,000, well, you need to be aware of that, right? Or maybe you have some other creative financing thing going on, but knowing these numbers up front is big. Now, let's start with the number 3 market on their list. They give us Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, we've talked about Raleigh, North Carolina before. We've actually talked about quite a few different lists where Raleigh has appeared, and North Carolina actually has several different places that have appeared on our list, but Raleigh seems to be a regular occurrence. Now, if we take a look at the numbers that are revealed on Trulia, we can see that the median sales price in Raleigh is $250,000. If we then go and we look at homes for sale, we can see a pretty good variety of properties. I like the amount I'm seeing. There's a good spread. I typically am going to look for 3-bed, 2-bath. But again, that's a general thing. You're going to find in some marketplaces, 2-bedroom, 2-baths are awesome. Here, there are some submarkets where a 2-bedroom, 2-bath is awesome. Anything close to a major college or university tends to be really good for 2-bed, 2-bath setups where you've kind of got 2 master bedrooms set up with some shared common area. Those tend to be really good investments. As I've said on previous shows, the first thing I'll typically do when I look at one of these lists and I'm thinking about purchasing myself, I'm going to assume the 3-bedroom, at least 1.5 bath scenario for these properties. And look, usually on Trulia, you don't need to designate a half. If you do 2, you'll get 1.5 and 2-bedroom homes. And then just take a look and see what you've got. Now, I'm just hovering over Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm seeing that there are 1,160 homes that meet my criteria. It's only showing me 30 of them. So that's when you should start to drill down and turn on things that concern you. Now, in my case, I typically go with crime first. I like to stay away from the places that are red hot with crime. I'm not horribly averse to maybe the little bit slightly yellow. I like green, but going in there and taking a look at properties that can be a good return on investment in some of those lighter shades typically gives you a little bit less of a headache in the long run. And I'm seeing stuff ranging from really downtown near the warehouse district. I'm seeing 850,000, 1.02 million. What's interesting here is some of these higher priced properties are right dead center in the middle of a super red zone, according to Trulia. So it's also one of these things that informs you that, you know what, getting ground truth is also critically important. I'm also seeing things down here that look very nice at the $370,000 mark. A couple of opportunities at the $182,000 mark. Really wide varieties of choices here that you can look over and then figure out which one of these makes sense. And once you find an area that makes sense for you, then you want to switch over to the rental view for these areas and find out what homes of a similar size are renting for. Once you've done that, you're able to make a more educated decision. Now, in this particular case, if we just run the general numbers, right, we go with the 1% rule, where if you take, say, the price of a home, you take the assumption that you're going to have a 20% down payment. Whatever's left, 1% of that should be what you get in rent, right? That's the way I do it. And apparently there's other people calculate it differently. I've had some of you chime in and say it's a different number for you, that you don't even do the whole, only do 80% of the purchase price. But again, this is math. So I just kind of go with what works for me, and this number's worked for me in the past in terms of estimating. Now, the median rent in Raleigh is $1,395. If we just compare that to the median sales price, that would indicate that we should be seeing a rent of $2,000 per month. Now, of course, these are median numbers, right? So they're not real. That's not a real house number. But when you go in and you start looking at the actual data on what these things tend to rent for, you start to find that there is some reasonableness there. There are places where you can find an opportunity. In fact, in looking through the data for Raleigh here, I actually found a couple that looked very compelling. There was one that needed some work. It looked like it was mostly aesthetic stuff, needed a paint job, needed some fix up, but something that lended itself perfectly to someone who might want to do either a buy and flip or a buy, rent, and then later flip, depending on your plan. So Raleigh should definitely be on your radar if you're considering jumping in and doing some new investing. Now, second on their list, this is again from the good folks at Homeunion, a city. All three of these cities are going to sound familiar. Some of them are going to sound a little bit old school at this point because they've been on our radar for so long. But number 2 on their list is Tampa, Florida. Now, they have the highest. Let's see. No, they don't have the highest. They have the second highest, of course, because they're second. Landlords collect an average of $18,024 per year in rent, which amounts to about 32% of a local renter's annual income. And with the currently low investment home prices on our website, you're sure to profit from the Tampa single-family rental market. Tampa's employment picture continues to improve, fueling demand for all types of rentals. That noting that the unemployment rate dropped 40 basis points from 3.6%, also outperforming the nation, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Raleigh, some of the notes they made, what I just offered you was just stuff that I kind of pulled out about Raleigh, but what they mentioned about Raleigh is that the metro features average annual single-family residential rents of $18,840 a year, which equates to just over 29% of a resident's annual income. Raleigh rental home prices on our site are currently low, so they're kind of pushing. Relative to the national median investment home price of nearly $200,000, according to Hovland. Okay. Now, number 1 on our list, Austin, Texas, comes up on their list. I always find it interesting when some of these big cities that seem to be really ballooning are so hot when surrounding communities are less so. However, the reason why Austin is such a draw and why it represents such a great opportunity for folks, even who don't invest in Austin, but who invest in communities bordering Austin, is the high-tech sector and high employment rates. It's the most expensive rental market on their platform, ideal for landlords seeking long-term appreciation. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Austin's unemployment rate dropped 70 basis points from June to November in 2017, hitting 2.7%, well below the national average of 4.1%. But then we get into the slightly more disappointing part of the Austin market. The average listing price is $579,552, and the median rent per month is $1,950. Now, does that mean you can't find good deals? No, but it means you might have to struggle a little bit more. You might want to look at other areas. And areas we've talked about here before, particularly Round Rock, still is an area I think can work really well for you. But you jump through those same gymnastics. You go ahead and you take a look at these areas. You can view the homes for sale on places like Trulia or Zillow or whatever your preferred site is, and put in there what your preferred configuration is, and start poking around and see what you can find. You're going to see a variety of prices. Towards the north end of town seems to be where some of these, and up in Red Rock is where you're going to find a lot of opportunities. I'm seeing a 3-bed, 2-bath home in Round Rock for $185,000. That 1,400 square feet, just under $1,500. That would absolutely grab my eye. That's something I would jump on in a heartbeat. If you want to get a little closer into town, here's a 3-bed, 3-bath. 1,500 square foot home for $210. So definitely opportunities. Now, these two that I've just listed are just outside of Austin. This one's officially in a little town called Tuxford, no, that's the name of the street. Is this one officially in Austin or not? Yes, it is. It's officially in Austin. But this one would work exceptionally well. And I think you could find yourself being able to do some math on this and discovering that you could definitely make this a positive cash flow property, given the very reasonable price point. All right. So we've given you a few places you can check out. I think those are good places to start, but always keep in mind what we've talked about. You're looking for the greatest leverage, the greatest payoff for every dollar you spend. And it's about utility. And it's one reason why we don't see cities like San Francisco on this list, because the amount of money you have to come up with is absolutely nuts. As I've mentioned before, the pace of rental costs has not kept pace with the cost of a home. So while that means it may not make a whole lot of sense to buy for some folks, depending on where they're at, it really doesn't make sense if you're an investor. It's one of those scenarios where you'd have $1 million invested, And the odds are you wouldn't be able to rent for what would cover your payment, assuming you only put down 20%. And it's not even about how much the home cost on paper. It's about how much cash you put into it. If I have to take $200,000 in cash and put it into a home in San Francisco and then rent it, I'm not going to be able to rent it for what that home cost me. But if I took that same $200,000 and bought two homes, the last two I just mentioned in Austin, well, you're going to see positive cash flow from those at a pretty obscene level. If we just take the example of those two properties, and that would mean you'd only be financing $100,000. Each one of those would probably rent, from the numbers I'm seeing, the broad stroke numbers I'm seeing here would be anywhere between $1,400 and $1,800 a month. So just based off of your mortgage payment, we're talking about $475, $500 a month for the mortgage. That comes out to almost $1,000 in positive cash flow every month per house. $2,000 positive cash flow if you bought both of those homes with just the money you would have used to put a down payment on a $1 million+ home in San Francisco, where you would have then been carrying a note for $800,000, assuming you get a cheap house, right? Because $1 million is cheap. It's all about getting the biggest bang for your buck. Don't let yourself get conned into just being, and I get that some people will come back, and I have this argument quite a bit with folks. Well, what about all that equity? What about all that money that I'm going to miss out on in terms of growth in value? Yeah, you know what? That's a thing to be concerned about. But if you can find a stable market that's going to regularly earn you $1,000 for your money each month, where you're going to be negative equity in the other location, I can get where you're hoping you can maybe ride a wave of appreciation. But does anyone really believe that we're in a position right now where in a marketplace like San Francisco, we can continue to sustain 6 to 9% annual appreciation? I just don't see it. At some point, that just has to stop, right? That's a train that can't just keep going. The only way that train keeps going is if incomes increase, right? Or we have to come up with some extremely creative ways for folks to blow $1 million and afford it on less money per month, right? And I don't see that happening anytime soon. So logically, if we're talking about what you do today, I think the smartest communities are ones like this, where maybe you're going to Raleigh, maybe you're going to Tampa, maybe you're going to Austin, but you're smartly using them as a jump-off point. You're realizing, you know what? These areas have been overfished by investors. They've driven up prices. There's a huge level of demand. There's likely to be some kind of softening, although I think these markets are a little bit more immune to it than others. Tampa maybe a little bit more. I think Tampa actually it would have a tendency to be a little bit less immune to downward turns. If I'm not mistaken, Tampa did see a downturn in the last downturn. These other two areas, less so. It was much more mild. But my feeling is that moving forward, using these kind of ground zero places as opportunities to look to bordering communities represents an excellent opportunity for investors. All right, folks. I hope that's been some valuable information. At the very least, we can bounce it around in your head, see how you feel about it. Maybe it informs some other decisions that you're thinking about making in the wide, wonderful world of real estate. As always, the goal is to leave you with more knowledge on the table than you invested in time. Hope we've achieved that today. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.